The seventh session of the Senate in the second regular session of the 17th Congress is hereby called to order. Senator Grace Poe will lead the chamber in prayer.
Sa ngalan ng Ama, ng Anak, ng Espiritu Santo. Amen. Panginoon ng Sanlibutan, maraming salamat po at tinipon ninyo kami sa bulwagang ito ngayong araw. Gabayan po ninyo ang bawat isa sa amin para maging bahagi kami ng pagpapabuti at pagpapanibago ng aming bansa. Liwanagin mo po ang aming isip para maunawaan namin ang nakalatag ng mga panukalang batas at usapin. Dalisayin mo po ang aming kalooban upang ang gawin namin ay maging para sa kapakinabangan ng nakararami. Manatili ka po sa amin sa lahat ng sandali. Iligtas mo po kami sa lahat ng kapahamakan at sakuna. Balutin mo sa iyong pag-ibig ang buo naming bansa. Amen. Sa ngalan ng Ama, ng Anak, ng Espiritu Santo.
Colegio San Agustin Himnayon Choral will lead us in the singing of the Philippine National Anthem, and then the group will also render a song entitled Ako ay Pilipino. Secretary, please call the roll.
Roll call of members, the Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, De Lima, Drilon, Ejercito, Escudero, Gatchalian, Gordon, Honasan, Hontiveros, Lacson, Ligarda, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Po, Recto, Soto, Trillanes, Villanueva, Villar, Subiri, Senate President Pimentel.
With 22 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority
Mr.
Leader.
President. Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journal of the 6th session, Wednesday, August 2, 2017, and consider the same as approved.
Is there any objection to the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Mr. President, we'd like to acknowledge the guests of our colleagues, guests of Senator Binay Pocholo Paragas of the General Manager of TIESA, and the guests of Senator Tiveros, the kapisanan ng mga manggagawa sa GOCCs and GFIs, Nagkaisa, Centro, Public Services International, and students of Keys School, Manila. I'd like to welcome them to the Senate, Mr. President.
Welcome to all of our visitors.
Thank you, Mr. President. There are two other sessions ongoing. I will move to adjourn them, but in the meantime, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved. Secretary, please proceed with the reference of business.
Bills on first reading. Senate Bill number 1538, entitled An Act Regulating Vaporized Nicotine Products by Senator Soto III.
Referred to the Committees on Health and Demography and Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship.
1539, an act designating the National Music Competitions for Young Artists, NAMSIA, as the National Youth Development Program for Music, defining its role and functions as such and appropriating funds therefore, by Senator Joseph Victor Ejercito.
To the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture, Ways and Means, and Finance.
1540, an act promoting environmentally sustainable transport by providing incentives for the manufacture, assembly, conversion, and importation of electric and hybrid vehicles, including charging stations and for other purposes, by Senator Pangilinan.
To the Committees on Ways and Means and Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship.
1541, an act increasing the excise tax on non-metallic and metallic minerals and mineral products and quarry resources, amending for the purpose sections 151 and 287 of the National Internal Revenue Code of 1997 as amended, and for other purposes, by Senator Subiri.
To the Committee on Ways and Means.
1542, an act creating two additional branches of the Regional Trial Court in the province of Sultan Kudarat. One is to be stationed in the municipality of Isulan and Tacurong City, further amending for the purpose Section 14, Paragraph M of Batas Pambansa Bilang 129, otherwise known as the Judiciary Reorganization Act of 1980, and appropriating funds therefore, by Senator Subiri.
To the Committees on Justice and Human Rights and Finance.
1543, an act providing for the special protection of children in situations of armed conflict and providing penalties for violations thereof, by Senator Joseph Victor Ejercito.
To the Committees on Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality, National Defense and Security, and Finance.
Resolution, proposed Senate Resolution number 455, urging the Executive Department through the Department of Foreign Affairs to extend an invitation to the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Human Rights of internally displaced persons to visit the country and look into the growing and reportedly worsening plight of persons displaced by the crisis in Marawi, which could continue and even worsen due to the extension of martial law in the whole of Mindanao until the end of 2017. The results of said visit could likewise aid in the enactment of remedial legislative measures, by Senator Laila M. De Lima.
To the Committees on Foreign Relations and Justice and Human Rights.
Communications, letter from the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas transmitting to the Senate copies of certified and authenticated BSP issuances in compliance with Section 15A of RA 7653, the New Central Bank Act, circular letters CL 2017-033 to 044 dated 4, 12, and 26 May 2017, 8, 15, and 22 June 2017, 5, 6, 7, 11, and 12 July 2017, memorandum numbers M 2017-016 to 022 dated 5, 10, and 15 May 2017, 28 June 2017, 9 and 12 July 2017, and circular number 961 to 966 dated 2/8 and 27 June 5 and 11 July 2017.
To the Committee on Banks, Financial Institutions, and Currencies.
Committee report number 147, submitted by the Committee on Banks, Financial Institutions, and Currencies on Senate Bill number 178, introduced by Senator Paulo Benigno Bam Aquino IV, entitled An Act Providing for the Regulation and Supervision of Payment Systems, recommending its approval with amendments taking into consideration House Bill number 500, sponsor Senator Escudero.
To the calendar for ordinary business. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, would also like to acknowledge other guests, the guests of Senator Gordon. We missed to mention that the Office of the Court Administrator, or Administrator Jose Milas, Justice Marquez is here, and from the Philippine National Police, Attorney Triangulo, Police Chief Sup Manzanilla, Police Director Aspera, Senior Sup Almaden, Senior Superintendent Juan Chacan, from the Sandigan Bayan, Attorney Maria Teresa Pabulayan, and the Ombudsman, Attorney Dennis Garcia. I would like to welcome them to the Senate, Mr. President.
Welcome to our guests from the Supreme Court, PNP, and the Ombudsman, and to all the others.
Also, Mr. President, last Wednesday, we greeted Senator Gordon a very happy birthday. And yesterday was the birthday of Senator Trillanes, so I would like to greet Senator Trillanes a birthday greeting and ask for a 1-minute suspension.
Session suspended.
yan. Pati yung opisina, hindi makakapasok eh. Paano ka pupunta rito? By the sea?
Session is resumed.
Thank you. Mr. President, before the two sponsorship speeches and the numerous bills for interpellation, Senator Dick Gordon wishes to have the floor for a few minutes, Mr. President.
Senator Gordon is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise today on a question of transcendental importance to our country. I know that we have passed the motorcycle bill law already that requires readable plates. But nonetheless, Mr. President, I will just ask a simple question. How many of us here have had somebody killed and had no justice in our family? How many of our citizens in this country find themselves in a situation where napapatay yung kanilang kamag-anak na walang katarungan na kukuha? And to my mind, Mr. President, medyo sobra-sobra na ang nangyayari. It hits close to home. It hit close to home last Saturday night when a pair of law-abiding citizens by the name of Marasigan brothers were assassinated in San Juan. Mike Marasigan was somebody I met in Pinatubo, Mr. President, at the height of the cataclysm that was Pinatubo. Nakikisilong siya sa aking magulang, sa aking nanay, at the time kumakalog at bumabagyo ng abo at bumabagsak ang mga gusali sa Olongapo. Hindi ko pa siya kilala noon. Nilikas ko yung aking ina, dinala ko doon sa bahay ko sapagkat walang kasama mother ko nung araw sa kanyang bahay. At naisama ko, akala ko isang pastor, si Mike Marasigan, sapagkat that time mukhang pastor talaga. Mapakabait ang itsura. That started a long time friendship off and on, perpetrated through text and once in a while a phone call. He was editor of the Business Day, Mr. President, magazine. At lumakas ang kanyang pagtaas sa pamamahayag sa isang respetadong dyaryo. At nagsimula siya nung wala pa nga siyang sweldo, pero dahil ilan lang sila doon, hindi siya nasusweldo, pero he went on and pursued the task of being a newspaper man. And eventually, na-promote siya bilang one of the editors of that newspaper. Last Saturday, sinundan sila ng nakamotorsiklo para ng sasakyan, isang tao bumaba at nagdiskarga ng 34 bullets. At ang tama ay kay Mike Marasigan at Timano patay si Mike Marasigan. Tinakbo yung kanyang kapatid at ito ay hindi rin nalagutan rin ang hininga pagdating doon sa hospital. Mr. President, Mike Marasigan worked as a communications consultant for Finance Secretary Carlos Dominguez. Mike Sonny Dominguez is not unknown to me, being from the same school and having known each other in the dorm at the Ateneo. Mike was known to him for the last 30 years, and he had very high regard for his skills and thorough professionalism. As I said, Mike was a passionate journalist ever since, according to Sonny Dominguez, he was in 6th grade. When Business World opened, and I'd like to correct myself, it's not Business Day, it's Business World. In 1987, he had 2 concurrent posts, chief of reporters and research head. And finally, they had only 17 editorial employees, and he did double duty, and he had to work around the clock. Now, Mr. President, policemen should be our protectors. And policemen are supposed to solve crimes with the help of the community. And that is why the motorcycle plate number law was enlarged and is supposed to become readable. But, Mr. President, at the same time, on August the 5th, a Pasay councilor was killed at the SM South Mall riding on a wheelchair. And they went after him, and he was killed. And I do not know his background. I understand there have been assassination attempts on Mr. Rivera 2 or 3 times. And that's why he was on a wheelchair. But I understand there were 4 motorcycle riding men who went down and assassinated him. On August 5, 2017, Judge Godofredo Abul Jr. from Butuan City, a regional trial court judge, was killed while his wife was wounded when an unidentified motorcycle riding gunman opened fire at their vehicle while the couple was about to leave their house. This is a 68-year-old man accompanied by a 65-year-old wife. On 27 July, Julito Orillan Neda of Surigao broadcaster and owner of an FM station, media again, had reached his house and he was about to disembark from his motorcycle when the gunman riding on a motorcycle shot him with 45 caliber bullets. He was shot 4 times. I can go on and on. On 19 July, Rizal Assistant Prosecutor, a lady, Maria Ronatay of Taytay Rizal, shot her in her vehicle when her vehicle slowed down as it approached heavy traffic. So from media to judge to prosecutor. And then a barangay captain, Francisco Guevara from Caloocan City, on 13 July 2017. He was declared dead on arrival at Manila Central University Hospital where he had 3 shots. According to the investigation, he was shot again after he fell from the first shots. A policeman, Abdul Jabbar Alonto, on 15 May, was killed while driving his green Toyota Vios when 2 men on a motorcycle blocked his path at the corner of Apasible and Peña Francia Streets, Paco, Manila. No one is spared. Police, mamahayag, West, prosecutor, walang patawad. Kaya harap ng asawa, kaya harap ng pamilya, pagka papatayin, walang humpay, walang pasubali. Then a board member from Sorsogon on April 2017, these are public figures, Sorsogon City, was gunned down by an assailant riding a motorcycle just a few meters away from his home. On 17 November 2016, very close to what we're investigating right now, Arturo La Chica, formerly with the Professional Regulatory Commission, was taken into the Bureau of Customs and he was on board at the Toyota Altis when a person wearing a face mask walked toward the passenger side of the vehicle after alighting from his motorcycle and killed him. Ni wala hong pambayad sa panlibing. Nagbigay pa yung mga kapwa niya kasama sa customs. At ang balita ay napakabuting tao, napakabait, walang record na masama. Ang kapatid dito ay mga professionals, mga abogado sa Amerika, pero siya naiwan para magsilbi rito sa customs. At mahirap magsilbi sa customs na iiwas ka sa mga, alam na natin, sa mga nakita natin, binigyan tayo ng listahan na nalalagyan sa customs. So, Mr. President, I will just go from this one to another extreme. Babae naman. Second girl. October 9, 2016, alam namin to ni Senator Lacson, Oriental Mindoro, Citizens Crime Watch activist, Zenaida Luz, riding in tandem killers to gun down Zenaida M. Luz turned out to be 2 junior police officials. 1 bemedaled. Senior Inspector Magdaleno Pimentel Jr. and Inspector Markson Almeras. Now, this is not the first time I've stood up here, Mr. President. There was another case involving 2 judges before. Isang judge sasama ng asawa niya sa Aurora. sa bayan mismo nila Senator Angara. At yung isa naman sa bayan naman ni Senator Villanueva, Bulacan. Parehong West, parehong kasamang asawa, pinaslang rin sila at hanggang ngayon, tila wala pang katarungan. Now, Mr. President, I know that we have proposed a solution here. But I would like, and this is a Senate of the people of this country, na huwag naman masabi na tahimik tayo at para wala tayong pakialam sa mga pinapatay dito sa ating bayan. Na tila halos tuwi-tuwi na may namamatay nang nakasakay sa motorsiklo. Who is safe? How do the people who lost their relatives feel? I know how it feels. If you look at the Manila Times today, in the last few days, they have what they call a throwback paper. I had it here, but I wasn't able to bring it down. And it will show you as early as a long time ago, people were being killed. My father was killed. I know how it feels. After 3 attempts of my father's life, having to have to fight, having to go to the Justice Department, talking to the justice officials, talking to the chief of the PC, talking to the NBI chief, halos wala nangyayari. Now, our country's criminal investigation system has really suffered, and it's about time that we lay it on the line here in the Senate. That we have to tell our law enforcement, NBI, PNP, CIDG, and all the others, and I'm not even going to those situations where people are killed in their own homes. Maybe they deserve it, some people say. Maybe those people in jail who were killed by the policemen deserve it. But we have to use the courts of law to be able to get justice in our country. If we depart from the rule of law, Mr. President, there is despotism. If we allow certain people the power to kill people, don't know who they are, it could be guns for hire, it could be policemen, and they know they can get away with it, it will go on and on. And it's my hope not one of us here will be victimized by that. Not one of our members of our families will have to cry when people have shot one of us. And this has happened also in Congress. You will recall the Masbate Congressman Espinosa was shot right outside of Congress. I can even go back before Congressman Amante, halos kasabay, napatay ng father ko, halos kasabay rin si Judge Valdez Santacorong at that time, Cotabato was shot while receiving Holy Communion alongside Mr. Crisologo, Congressman at that time. We can go back. But there seems to be no surcease. I mean, it's so dangerous nowadays, and it has gotten worse to be a public official. If the public officials are not safe in this country, if they cannot find justice in this country, what more so with the common man, with the common tao? And many newspapers have come out in the world. New York Times take advantage of the situation and make the Filipino look bad because our justice system doesn't seem to work. I just said the ambassador of Switzerland and no less than the head of the Foreign Ministry of Switzerland in my office in charge of Asia and the Pacific, and the discussion was about killings, about the death penalty, about human rights. Now, Mr. President, we are all Filipinos. Like I tell you right now, many a time enough I've stood up here. Once upon a time, there was a checkpoint in Bulacan, and people were stopped, and they were simply massacred. And I stood up at that time. That was never solved. One time I was lucky. There was a daughter of a Muslim professor and a Christian who was a teacher at UP but moonlighting as a call center operator. At paglabas niya sa gabi sa call center, inabloot siya sa taxi, sama nang may nakasunod ata ng motorsiklo, at pagkatapos pinastang. At kung hindi tayo tatayo dito, hindi masosolve. It was General Edgar Aglipay who we called and made sure that the case would be solved. Now, Mr. President, I only stand up today to try and reiterate the fact that we must not be helpless, that we in this august chamber should not take it with a shrug, with a talagang ganyan, with the helplessness that has identified this country since colonial days. Masyadong malaki ang kalaban, may baril, huwag ka na makialam, baka mapatay ka pa, huwag ka na magtestigo. So it will go on and on and on. And that's why perhaps we ought to find our way clear in looking for solutions, not just for whistleblowers, not just for people who will bravely testify, not just for witness protection, but once and for all, try and get the killers who are faceless and who put crime in the front pages of our newspaper and who put their dastardly activities, painfully in the hearts of many of our citizens. And on that note, as I promised, I will be short. I just wanted to stand up here and deliver this extemporaneous speech because it comes from the heart, Mr. President, and I believe we should all take notice. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Gordon.
Move that we refer the privileged speech of the gentleman from Zambales to the Committee on Public Order, Mr. President.
Is there any objection to the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill 1533 under Committee Report 143.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, last week, Senator Bam Aquino has already started with the sponsorship of Senate Bill 1533, or the measure on Balik Scientist program. However, Senator J.B. Ercito likewise made a reservation to deliver a co-sponsorship speech today. So may we therefore move to recognize Senator Ejercito. Afterward, Senator Grace Poe will also deliver her co-sponsorship speech.
Senator Ejercito is recognized.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. I stand today to co-sponsor a measure which this representation considers very significant in achieving the government's priority plan to invest in science, technology, and innovation. Senate Bill 1533 under Committee Report 143, or the Balik Scientist Act. This measure is also included in the legislative agenda of the government under the Philippine Development Plan of 2017 up to 2022. The most precious resource of this country is its human resource. Filipinos are known as hardworking and innovative, which make us in demand, and these characters help us thrive in our respective fields in many parts of the world. The same is true in the field of science and technology. Filipino geniuses like Diosdado Banatao, a Filipino-American, and an alumnus of Ateneo de Tuguegarao and Mapua Institute of Technology, is known to have developed the first single-chip graphical user interface accelerator for computer. Julian Banzon of Balanga, Bataan is known to have studied methods of producing alternative fuels from coconut and sugarcane. And Fidel Mundo, a Filipino pediatrician known and credited for studies that led to the invention of incubator and Jodi's relieving device. This is to name a few among the role of Filipinos with great minds and contributions in the field of science and technology. Mr. President, however, it is an area of concern where some of our most brilliant minds prefer to seek better economic opportunities abroad, for this reflects the government's lack or weak support to their field. This measure for the body's consideration aims to strengthen and institutionalize the Department of Science and Technology's Balik Scientist program. The legislative intention is to encourage our geniuses abroad to come home by doing the thing that we should have done yesterday, which is giving our scientists support and equitable incentives and benefits commensurate to their talents, education, and contributions. Mr. President, this measure will be one of our foundations in driving our economy to a greater height. With research and development, innovative technology, and breakthroughs in science, we are assured that we are one step ahead. I therefore urge this distinguished body support for the speedy passage of this bill. Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Senator Ejercito.
Senator Grace Poe, Mr. President.
Senator Poe is recognized.
Mr. President, I would like to extend my full support for Senate Bill number 1533 under Committee Report number 143, otherwise known as the proposed Balik Scientist Act. As one of the authors and advocates of this measure, I would like to thank Senator Bam for prioritizing it among the many, many measures referred to his committee. Mr. President, a great man once said, "If I have seen further than others, it is by standing upon the shoulders of giants." That man was Isaac Newton, whose contributions to mathematics, physics, and astronomy made the modern world possible. Indeed, scientists are unappreciated giants on whose shoulders we stand and whose contributions are rarely appreciated. Mr. President, in economic terms, various academic papers estimate that a 1% increase in research and development expenditures leads to GDP increase between 0.2 to 0.7%. Many of the comforts we enjoy today, light bulbs, the internet, air conditioning, would not have been possible without the hundreds of scientists, engineers, and innovators who worked on them. Unfortunately, we are far beyond our ASEAN neighbors in terms of R&D investment. According to a paper by Dr. Jose Albert, we spend around 0.11 to 0.14% of our GDP on R&D. In contrast, Thailand spends about 0.21, Malaysia 0.65 to 1%, and Singapore 2%. Mr. President, we have a substantial shortage in science and technology personnel due to our investment in R&D. According to the Department of Science and Technology, the presence of research and development personnel in the Philippines stands at 165 scientists per million Filipinos, way below the UNESCO recommendation of 380 scientists per million persons. Even worse, outbound science and technology workers in the Philippines have increased 148% from 9,877 in 98 to 24,000 in 2009. It is clear that urgent intervention is needed to stop the brain drain of Filipino scientists from our country. These days, the phrase Filipino scientist is often accompanied by the words working abroad. This trend must be reversed, and it will not do so by itself. Mr. President, the proposed Balik Scientist is the first step towards welcoming our Filipino scientists back. In sum, it proposes a core set of incentives for all Filipinos, scientists, and additional incentives depending on their terms of engagement with the country. I think it is a good thing that the proposed incentives are too long to be mentioned here. The proposed terms of engagement range from 15 days to 6 months for the short-term engagement, 6 months to 3 years for the medium term, and 5 years for the long-term engagement. If this measure is enacted, it will be another game-changing social legislation which will bolster the legacy of the 17th Congress. I therefore call upon my colleagues in this chamber to throw their full and unconditional support to this bill. Let us be the first to roll the red carpet for our scientists. Our scientists deserve nothing less. Thank you, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, to give time to the members to study the proposed measure, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1533.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, we suspend consideration.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill 1537 under Committee Report 145.
Any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Mr. President, last week, Senator Risa Ontiveros and several other senators have already started with the sponsorship of Senate Bill 1537, or the measure on the Healthy Nanay and Bulilit Act. However, Senator Nancy Binay and Senator Ralph Recto likewise made a reservation to deliver a co-sponsorship speech today. So, I move to recognize Senator Nancy Binay. Afterwards, the President Pro Tem.
Senator Binay is recognized.
Mr. President, I rise today to co-sponsor Senate Bill number 1537, or an act providing for the scaling up of nutrition for the first 1,000 days of life through a strengthened integrated strategy for maternal, neonatal, child health and nutrition, reconstituting for the purpose the National Nutrition Council, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes. This measure is part of the bigger picture of caring for our mothers and children, the so-called hope of our country. This bill also complements the maternity leave bill that provides 120 days of leave, which this chamber passed in third reading a few months ago. Underweight, stunted, and wasted children remain a big concern for our country today. According to the 2015 National Nutrition Survey, 2 out of 10 children aged 0 to 5 years are underweight. 3 out of 10 children aged 0 to 5 years are stunted. And 1 out of 10 children aged 0 to 5 years are wasted. If we compare these figures historically, Mr. President, we are making little progress to combat these situations that affect our children. We will have a long way to go if we are to fulfill our obligations under the Sustainable Development Goals, especially SDG 1, 2, and 3, which focus on eliminating poverty and hunger, as well as fostering good health and well-being. Marami na pong mga pag-aaral ang nagpapakita ng koneksyon ng malnutrisyon sa magiging buhay ng isang bata hanggang sa pagtanda at ang implikasyon nito sa ekonomiya. The estimated worldwide impact of malnutrition, according to a 2016 policy brief of the Global Panel on Agriculture and Food Systems for Nutrition, could be as high as $3.5 trillion per year or $500 per person. Further costs are incurred through impaired learning, poor school performance, compromised adult labor productivity, and increased healthcare costs, that same study said. Ayon naman sa Save the Children, 3% ng gross domestic product or GDP ng Pilipinas ang nawala sa ekonomiya noong 2013 dahil sa epekto ng childhood stunting o pagkabansot sa workforce productivity at edukasyon. Kung isasama pa ang health costs, hanggang 1.6% pa ang dagdag na kawalan sa ekonomiya, Ginoong Pangulo. Children who are stunted in the first 2 years of life are more likely to repeat grade levels, drop out of school, delay school entry, and have lower income levels when they enter the workforce, according to the same study. Importante rin pong magbigyan ng pansin ang mga ina, lalo na sa panahon ng kanilang pagbubuntis, Mr. President. Kasama po ng pagbibigay ng maternity leave benefits ang pagbibigay pansin sa kanilang kalusugan at kapakanan. We can safely say that a healthy mother equals a healthy baby. Ang malusog na ina ay makakapagluwal ng malusog na anak. A child's first 1,000 days of life, or from conception to his or her second birthday, are considered to be a crucial time if we want him or her to grow up healthy and be successful in life. We can reverse these negative scenarios that can affect our children, their mothers, and our country through our interventions, especially if we focus on the health of mothers and children. We also need to increase nutrition spending to at least 2.1% of the GDP, which is the worldwide average spending. The country presently spends less than that, or 0.52%, according to the Save the Children report. We also need to engage all levels of government for strengthening policy and programs, as well as the private sector and non-government organizations, to reach all parts of the Philippines, especially in areas of high poverty and marginalized groups. Katulad ng sinabi ko noon, it takes a community to raise a child, kung kaya't marapat lamang na gawin natin ito sa Kongreso. Bilang bahagi ng mas malaking komunidad, ang ating tungkulin na pangalagaan ang buhay at kalusugan ng mga ina at mga anak dahil sila ang susunod na henerasyon. So I urge my colleagues in Congress, let us pass Senate Bill number 1537. Maraming salamat po.
Mr. President, I move to recognize the President Pro Tem, Senator Ralph Recto.
Senator Recto is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, it has been said that politicians love to kiss babies when they run for office, but kiss them goodbye the moment they're elected. If babies only know how to throw tantrums through tweets, or if they could bawl out in social media, their shout-outs would be hard to ignore. Unfortunately, they don't have the muscle of the unions and the money of business to lobby their cause. So it behooves us, we who are in power, to articulate the plight of those without voices and argue the case of those who are powerless. We do that, my dear colleagues, not just for all their sakes, but for ours too. For isn't it true, Mr. President, that it is in how we treat our young that we are measured, and that how we care for those in the dawn of life that we are weighed. Through the ages, children's welfare has been the best measure of how great a society is. The good things we shower our children measure how good we govern. Sadly, the state of our children tells us the work to be done before we can begin telling ourselves that we have done half a good job. And nowhere is this more evident than in the malnutrition that haunts our young. For Filipino children under age of 5, 1 in 4 is underweight. In absolute numbers, roughly 3 million or equivalent to the population of Batangas. 3 in 10 are stunted. And you want to know how many they are? More than 4 million, or the population of the cities of Manila, Marikina, Caloocan, and Navotas combined. 1 in 12 is wasted, which translates to a little more than 1 million kids who are underweight for their height. If they were a province, they can qualify for 4 congressional district seats, and if they were a party list, they will have to fill a venue 65 times the size of Araneta Coliseum should they hold in one place a convention to choose their nominees. In all, there are 7.8 million undernourished kids 5 years old and below. If we raise the age covered to 10, the number shoots up to 18 million. 18 million is the population of 6 regions put together: Cordillera, Cagayan Valley, Mimaropa, Zamboanga, Arm, and Caraga. It is a number bigger than the population of Metro Manila. This ranks us 9th in the world in stunted growth among children. For most of the children, the bad effects of undernutrition are long-lasting, if not lifelong. But to many, the effects are immediately fatal. Close to 35,000 Filipino children die per year due to undernutrition. On a daily basis, that's 95 victims felled by the lack of food. That's an annual casualty rate higher than whatever the final death toll of the Marawi crisis will be. This man-made calamity causes more deaths yearly than the most powerful typhoon in history, Yolanda. Gutom, my friends, is the real grim reaper, with far more kills that it reduces Tokhang to a bumbling understudy. What Gutom cannot kill, it disables, reducing its victims' capacity to learn, to work, and to be healthy. We don't have to cite studies for us to conclude that malnutrition leads to low education. Once the stomach is empty, the head follows. For the student to absorb learning, his body must first absorb nutrients. It has been calculated that 15% of school repeaters are those who have poor access to food. Being underweight on the scales leads to underperformance in school. These poor learners would later form the pool of poorly trained workers. The link is clear. Childhood stunting stunts income opportunities later in life. There is a correlation between thin bodies and lean paychecks. Mr. President, studies upon studies have concluded that child and maternal health and nutrition are the best predictors for human capital. Thus, critical care is crucial in the first 1,000 days of a child's life. What the child would later become in life is shaped by the first 1,000 days of the child's life. And that care begins in the mother's womb. If the mother lacks nutrients, so will her baby. The race to good life has its starting block in the 270 days before birth. The next phase is the birth to 6 months, and the last is from 6 months to 2 years. There are needs that must be given in each of the phases. For example, prenatal care and proper nutrition for the mother during her pregnancy. Vaccination and breast milk regimen, to cite a few, for the baby from birth to 6 months. And the right food from 6 months to 2 years to guarantee brain development. The last one is important. If these are given, a child has a 10 times better chance in beating life-threatening diseases. The child will have 50% more earning power as an adult and is more likely to complete 5 more years of schooling. In other words, the child will be able to blow the candles on his or her cake for his or her second birthday and during more birthdays to come. If denied, this would cause damage on the child's health that is long-term and irreversible. Or worse, the only candles that will be lit for the child are the ones for his or her funeral. Mr. President, the delivery of these is what this bill mandates. We have to charter these deliverables so they will form a first 1,000 days of life instruction manual that all administrations from here on must follow. In short, this law for a healthy childhood is, to a large extent, the Magna Carta for a better life. Mr. President, sure, this bill will entail costs. Even daycare feeding is covered by the there is no free lunch doctrine. But the benefit, I assure you, is far greater than the cost. Yes, there are many things that we should scrimp on, but our children's health and schooling are the last things that we should economize. If we're lax in tallying the bombs dropped, then let us not be paralyzed into inaction by bean counting the meals we should serve hungry kids. For next year, Mr. President, whether this bill gets enacted or not, let us summon all our will and all our wisdom in finding funds for the Children's Nutrition Program. I know that we are ramping up funding for education, but let us not forget that the work to meet the children's hunger for knowledge, to be effective, must go with programs to end their hunger for food. 1,000 days is the term of this Congress. During this period, we can refuse or fail or delay the passage of many of these bills before us, and the damage it would cause is survivable. But if we fail to pass the bill on the first 1,000 days, the harm to our children will be great. If we fail, it will be our turn to be weighed by them. As sasabihin ng mga batang hindi sapat ang timbang, tinimbang po namin kayo at ang laki ng inyong pagkukulang. Thus, I urge that we pass this bill without delay para sa kabataan at para sa kinabukasan. Maraming salamat, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. To give time to the members to study the proposed measure, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1537.
Any objection? Hearing none, we suspend consideration.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the permission of the body, I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill 1399 under Committee Report 58.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, this is the measure on Police Court Act of 2017. And the parliamentary status of the measure is that we are now in the period of interpellation. Before I move to recognize the sponsor and the members of the Senate who wish to interpolate, I move to suspend the session for a few minutes, Mr. President.
Session suspended.
Ano rin ako? Interpolate din ako pero
Salary grade 27, Sandigan. Yung below, RTC. Even that guy, Marcos, yung nangyayari sa Leyte. Yung gusto, DOJ pala ng plan.
So ano? Okay, tomorrow? Senator Trillanes. Check lang, check. Double check lahat. Then, wala tayo. Ano di tayo? Gano'n ba kasama talaga? Ano na, close, parang lockdown? May courage sila. Ika-timing nila sa ASEAN ang rally nila. Diyan di maganda talaga. Parang papahiyain ng gobyerno. Hindi nga, kung kami ng senador, walang session, mahirap. All the more leave. So, okay na understand na namin. Meron bang mga gano'n? Thursday, wala isa akong ambassador. Thursday. So far, so good. Sino? Yun, ikaw na yan? Ikaw na mag-order yun? Ikaw na. Hindi pa draft. Pero general. Okay, Tito Sen.
We ready to resume, Mr. President?
Session is resumed.
Before the break, Mr. President, we now have on the floor the Police Court Act of 2017, Senate Bill 1399, under Committee Report number 58. I move to recognize the sponsor, Senator Richard Gordon, Chairman of the Committee on Justice and Human Rights, and to interpellate the Minority Leader, Senator Frank Rilon, thereafter Senator Tiveros and Senator Lacson.
Okay, the sponsor, Senator Gordon, is recognized as well as Senator Drilon for interpellation.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Will the gentleman sponsor once more yield the floor for some questions?
Of course, Your Honor, willingly.
Mr. President, we first start with the title of the measure. The title of the measure is, quote, "An act establishing the police law enforcement courts, granting these exclusive original jurisdiction over violations of constitutional rights and the PNP rules of engagement committed by the police, amending Batas Pamansa Bilang 129 as amended, otherwise known as the Judiciary Act of 1980, appropriating funds therefore, and other purposes." May we spread into the record what is being amended in Batas Pambansa 129, Mr. President?
It would be the Sandigan Bayan, Mr. President. We're expanding that to the, initially, the thrust is to make the Court of Appeals be the appellate court for all police law enforcement boards on the local, from the local level, Your Honor. And at the same time, we are assigning special police courts so that we could shine the light of scrutiny on certain courts in the provinces so that we will know if these courts are moving or not, Your Honor.
Okay, so if I may spread into the record, the measure will amend Section 15 on the jurisdiction of the Court of Appeals, as it adds to its appellate jurisdiction the appellate police courts. Is that correct, Mr. President?
There would only be special police appellate courts, Your Honor.
Yes, that is not presently provided in the charter of the Court of Appeals or the law creating or the jurisdiction of the Court of Appeals, and therefore we are amending the provision on the Judiciary Act BP 129 by adding the appellate police.
Appellate police courts.
Yeah, we are creating
an appellate police court.
We are creating a police court and converting one of the divisions there.
Yes,
so
Your Honor.
That's the first amendment.
Depending on the Supreme Court, Your Honor, they will assign the appellate courts concerned, Your Honor.
Yeah, but an appellate police court will be created
Yes, Your Honor.
now. The second amendment is, as you said, the jurisdiction of the Sandigan Bayan.
Yes, Your Honor.
The Sandigan Bayan jurisdiction is being amended so that all criminal and civil cases filed against members of the Philippine National Police will be under the jurisdiction of the police courts. That's the other amendment.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, we are also amending the appeal process in the National Police Commission when we provided under the proposed measure that the
Resolutions of the National Police Commission, Your Honor.
yes, National Police Commission, yes,
The Civil
yes.
Service Commission.
The resolution of the National Police Commission in administrative cases is now appealable to the Appellate People's Court.
Yes, Your Honor.
That is also an amendment,
Yes, Your Honor.
because the present law provides that the decisions of the NAPOLCOM is appealable to the Secretary. Is
Of
that
local
correct?
government, Your Honor.
To the Secretary of Local Government.
Yes, Your Honor.
And the the decision of the Secretary of Local Government is applicable to the Civil Service Commission.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, what will happen is that the decisions of the NAPOLCOM will be appealed directly to the People's Court, or the Appellate Court.
Yes, Your Honor. You're correct.
Now, fourth, we are also amending the provision on the Public Attorney's Office by providing under this proposed measure that, and let me read on page 3 of the measure, section 7, the Public Attorney's Office shall represent members of the Philippine National Police charged with violation cognizable before the police courts for acts directly connected to performance of their lawful duties as police officers without need of evidence of indigency. That's what the law, that's what the proposed measure provides.
That's correct, Your Honor.
Yes. Would the gentleman agree that this is again an amendment to the present, to Republic Act 9406, which limits the PAO's jurisdiction or services to indigent persons? So we are amending this.
In effect, Your Honor.
Now, Mr. President, under our Constitution, every bill passed by Congress shall embrace only one subject, which shall be expressed in the title thereof. The title says amending Batas Pambansa 129, the Judiciary Act, but the gentleman from Olongapo and Zambales agreed with this representation that there are at least 4 amendments in this law.
Your Honor, there's a repeating clause that says all laws, decrees, orders, rules, and regulations, or other issuances or parts thereof inconsistent with the provisions of this act are hereby repealed or modified accordingly, Your Honor. And
Yes.
that's all provision.
Yes.
This is really by way of an amendment of these provisions, of course.
But isn't there more than one subject embraced in this bill?
There really is
Yes.
one subject that streamlines, Your Honor, the judicial system for police courts.
No, we are creating the police court. We are amending the Sandigan Bayan law. We are amending the public attorney's office jurisdiction, the public attorney's office mandate, and we are amending the appeal process for the NAPOLCOM.
Yes, Your
These
Honor.
are 4 different subjects which are being embraced in one law. Isn't this, can the gentleman clarify us as to how we can satisfy the constitutional mandate that every bill must embrace only one subject, which must be expressed in the title thereof? The title only says we are amending BP 129. But it is obvious from a study of the different provisions that it is not only 129 that we are amending. We are amending 3 other laws. The PAO law, the jurisdiction of the Sandigan Bayan,
Your Honor,
the jurisdiction of the National Police Commission.
yes, Your Honor, with respect. The title includes "and for other purposes." However, again, for purposes of clarity, this representation may agree to an amendment that would clarify it further, Your Honor, so that it is very clear that we are trying to suit the intention of the law because it is affected by other laws, that we can cover this with the repealing clause as well as the title, Your Honor.
Well, we look forward to this amendment, but this amendment that the committee, I assume, will propose to the body will comply with the constitutional requirement that the bill passed by Congress must embrace only one subject, which shall be expressed in the title. The title expressly refers to only one subject, BP 129, but the body refers to 3 other laws, which is to be amended, and I do hope that the gentleman, sponsor, can present the amendment which will satisfy this constitutional requirement.
Your Honor, the principal thrust of the law is the establishment of police law enforcement courts. That is very, very clear, Your Honor. And in the process, in order to streamline this process, you would have to create the repealing clause that will amend the other laws that are inconsistent with this automatically. Or, like I said, maybe we may craft language so that there can be no doubt about it. I can see the point of the gentleman, but I think it is quite clear that the purpose of this law is to really establish a new system of justice for policemen, Your Honor. And you could not do it without this amendment, and I think it will pass muster, Your Honor.
So is the gentleman at the appropriate time amenable to, or will the gentleman craft some committee amendments which will address this concern about multiple subjects being contained in the same law bill?
We will try to craft it to the satisfaction of the gentleman, but obviously, I would appreciate it if I can be assisted by the more qualified in terms of justice, the Department of the Justice Secretary and Executive Secretary, formerly the Honorable Franklin Drilon, Your Honor.
Mr. President, it is not to my satisfaction. I mean, there's nothing here that involves the personal satisfaction of this representation. It's just that this is a debate. I mean, we are
Of course, Your Honor.
analyzing the measure and see how it complies with our Constitution. That's all. There is no personal agenda here, Mr. President, and therefore there is no personal satisfaction involved.
Neither did I even suggest that, Your Honor. It is really out of respect that those words
know,
are
I know.
uttered. I'm sure you are aware of that.
I know,
But
Mr. President.
I just wanted to make sure that it can pass muster, because to me, like I said earlier this afternoon, when the gentleman from the Swiss government, who were quite concerned about events happening in the Philippines, was asking about what we were trying to do in terms of extrajudicial cases. I told them that this is something that we're discussing today. And of course, the technicalities that are involved in terms of having one law with one subject. This is not the first time this has happened in this Congress, Your Honor, and previous Congresses. And that's why there is always that repeating clause. And hopefully, when we really look at the thrust of this law, it is really to create a new system of justice for the police courts that I believe will be acceptable to the Supreme Court. However, to obviate that, we will try to craft language, Your Honor.
Mr. President, just for the record, the repealing clause, with all due respect to the gentleman, would not really be involved here. What is involved here is the presence of what in our mind are subjects which are not indicated in the title of the measure, and therefore embraces other subjects in contravention or of the constitutional edict that the bill should only have one subject. In any case, we can leave it at that, and we are eagerly awaiting the proposed amendment of the gentleman that he has manifested on the record.
Thank you, Your Honor, but not to prolong the matter, I believe that in my heart, the technicalities at times must always be subverted towards the effectiveness of substantial justice. And that is the only objective that I have here, Your Honor.
I
And
agree.
I will try to find out how we can craft this measure into something that will assure us that the Supreme Court, whether this is questioned, will allow it to be constitutional, Your Honor.
Well, Justice Marquez, I mean, is listening, so
He's not deciding, Your Honor.
Justice Maidas Marquez, the future member of the Supreme Court. We
If I
hope,
have my way, Your Honor, your way.
But I think he has that rank. He has that rank already.
he has that rank,
Yes.
yes, except that he is not recognized by certain members of the Supreme Court.
But can I make one suggestion
Please,
to the
yes.
gentleman?
Yes, Your Honor, please.
Since we already know the specific laws or even provisions of laws which are going to be repealed by this measure, so maybe we can enumerate them in the repealing clause and then just add a general clause as a general repeal of those inconsistent. So
With
that-
all due respect to the Senate President, it is not the fact that these laws are being repealed. It's the fact that these laws are being included in the amendment. The fact that these
Yeah.
laws are being amended in the same law
Yes,
that
sir.
we amend the other.
That's the constitutional argument.
Yes, yes.
But I agree with the sponsor that this measure has only one subject matter, and it's the establishment of the police enforcement court.
Yes.
So, but to improve, since in the discussion we already identified laws which will be repealed, and we know that they will be repealed. So let us, if possible, specify them in the repealing clause also. That's a suggestion.
The suggestion is well taken, Your Honor, and we will try to craft the necessary language that hopefully will be acceptable to all, Your Honor,
Yes. We, of
and
course,
legal.
Yeah, of course, we reserve our opinion on this point, and we will, as I said earlier, we shall await the suggested amendment of the gentleman sponsor before, in the course of the period for amendments. All right. Now, let's go to the substance of the proposed amendments. First, jurisdiction. Mr. President, the Sandigan Bayan currently has exclusive original jurisdiction over crimes committed by public officers, including the Philippine National Police, with salary grade 27 or higher, including PNP officers occupying the position of provincial director, and those holding the rank of senior superintendent or higher. Now, this present jurisdiction of the Sandigan Bayan is sought to be changed by regionalizing, in effect, the trial courts who will try cases of all PNP men and officers, regardless of rank. Is that a correct understanding, Mr. President?
It doesn't regionalize, Your Honor. It just, in effect, it relieves, and let me think ahead, may even be concurrent if we amend it, if there is an amendment to that effect. Allow the appellate courts to handle cases exclusively within the purview of the police court, Your Honor. And that is why I feel very strongly that, you know, there has always been this question of time and again, hoodlums in robes, because they hide in the bureaucracy. And now I think if we do this either with the Court of Appeals or I think you'll be able to have them more available to public scrutiny. It's easier. On the other hand, I would even hazard that we can retain that in the Sandigan Bayan and just create an amendment in terms of allowing concurrent jurisdiction by these police courts with the Sandigan Bayan, Your Honor.
How is yes, that's a very important statement, Mr. President. Can we have the benefit of the same being repeated so that we can fully appreciate the view of the sponsor on this point?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
No, in effect, we wanted to make sure that that we understood correctly what the gentleman sponsor intends to do in the period of amendment on the point of jurisdiction.
Well,
Pakiulit lang po.
the thrust is to have the Court of Appeals designate appellate police courts so that we would know right away who are the justices involved in the appellate courts that will handle police court cases.
Sir, no, the point, we are talking about the People's Court at the RTC level. Did I hear the sponsor?
The Supreme Court, Your Honor.
Did I hear the sponsor say that he is willing to consider at the appropriate time concurrent jurisdiction?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to clarify,
yeah,
Mr.
right.
Sponsor.
There.
Is the sponsor saying that at the appropriate time in the period of amendments, he may review this question of jurisdiction and may consider as an amendment concurrent jurisdiction of the People's Court and the Sandigan Bayan? Is that the police, ano tawag doon? Police Court and the Sandigan Bayan?
You can have concurrent jurisdiction. I think that we can confer that.
No, yeah,
The Supreme Court can confer that together with the Court of Appeals and the Sandigan Bayan. And I understand that there's a latest amendment to the Sandigan Bayan with respect to rank, Your Honor, that under Republic Act 10660, if no delegation, there's no allegation of damage to government worth 1 million or bribery, the RTC would have exclusive original jurisdiction. Notwithstanding if the salary grade is over 27, salary grade 27.
So is the, okay, for the record, Mr. President, Republic Act 10660, approved during the previous Congress, and I think sponsored by the then chairman of the Committee on Justice and now Senate President Pimentel, was introduced to streamline the jurisdiction and expedite cases pending before the Sandigan Bayan, as the debates will show and as defended when the bill was being defended by the Senate President. In fact, during the committee hearings and the interpellation on the bill before it became Republic Act 10660, the Sandigan Bayan justices revealed that it took more than an average of 6.5 years to resolve a case pending before the tribunal. Therefore, and it was on record that the Sandigan Bayan had about 3,000 cases before them, and it was thus proposed that the so-called minor cases be placed in the jurisdiction of the RTC, which composed more than 60% of the Sandigan Bayan load in 2014. So that among the changes introduced by Republic Act 10660 was narrowing the scope of the Sandigan Bayan's jurisdiction. To be cognizable by the Sandigan Bayan, the law provided that the following conditions must concur. The officer charged has a salary grade 27 or higher, and the information alleges damages to the government or any bribery, or damage to the government or bribery arising from some closely related transactions or acts in an amount not exceeding 1 million pesos. Where there is no allegation of bribery or damage to government, the regional trial court has exclusive jurisdiction. And cases falling under the RTC jurisdiction shall be tried in the judicial region other than where the official holds office. That was what the law provided, as sponsored by the Senate, by then Chairman of the Committee on Justice, Pimentel. And this was done in order to prevent public officials from exerting influence on the judges from the same region. Now, so apparently this operates as an exception to the rule on territorial jurisdiction in criminal cases. So that now the jurisdiction is outside the judicial region where the defendant holds office. Now, in the proposed bill, if we approve it in its present state, this distinction will be removed, and the trial will be precisely held in the territory where the crime was allegedly committed, and therefore the policy that it shall not be tried in judicial region where the office holds office under Republic Act 10660 would be put to note and set aside.
Your Honor, it is obvious, if I understand the thrust of the questions, it is obvious that the distinguished Senate President, who was then the author of RA 10660, obviously wanted to decongest the Sandigan Bayan because it was overloaded, as you say, about 6,000 cases, overload
3,000
or even 3,000. I mean, that is really an overload. And that is why they relieved the Sandigan Bayan and allowed any matter that involved less than 1 million, and provided there's no allegation of bribery, the lower courts can now maintain that. The interest of the people there is upheld because, first place, it's closer to the people, and secondly, it will become faster And that is exactly one of the reasons why I rose today, because apparently earlier, the lack not only of good investigators, but also I meant mention of the slow or the tardy nature of justice in this country, especially by the courts, has created an incentive for people to kill, because they make them die. It's just like death by losing your patience, or death by, you can no longer fight the system, and so you give up. And that is why we thought that we would make it more transparent, more visible, to create these courts, and subject, of course, to the allegations thereof. And of course, can you imagine, in some instances, according to the Philippine Star, it's not just 3,000, 4,214 Sandigan Bayan cases, July 21. Besides, Mr. President, the subject of this law really pertains only to police matters, Your Honor. To police, to cases involving the police, which is a very, very sore point today, that a lot of policemen are subject to suspicion, so that now it can be handled a little faster, hopefully, so that we can have a little bit more of justice swiftly, instead of just justice being denied by time.
Mr. President, precisely the need to expedite resolution of these cases was the underlying purpose in Republic Act 10660, which relocated and reapportioned the jurisdiction of the
Sandigan Bayan.
Sandigan Bayan, and at the same time maintain the constitutional mandate of the Sandigan Bayan to try cases involving public officials and anti-graft, the malfeasance and misfeasance committed by public officers, but now limited to the higher rank, not the ordinary rank and file below grade level 27 would be tried in the RTC. But having ruled on that, having provided for that, the law posts the principle that we should avoid the influence of the high-ranking official or the public official by requiring that the cases, that the jurisdiction shall be in a judicial region other than where the official holds office. For example, in the case of Colonel Marcos, ano pala first name? Si
Marvin.
Marvin Marcos. The jurisdiction is with the Regional Trial Court of Leyte. Now, but I think it is outside of the judicial region where the territorial, where the offense took place, precisely because we did not want, and the sponsor of the measure then, Senator Pimentel, did not want the influence of the public official by trying the case in the region where that official is holding office. But in this amendment, this bill, if approved, will precisely unravel all these things and bring back the case following the principle of territorial jurisdiction and have the case tried in the place where the offense was allegedly committed.
The gentleman
as in any
is
ordinary criminal case.
the gentleman from Iloilo is obviously thinks very, very well about the problems of this country, and I agree with him up to a point, because venue can be requested to be transferred, Your Honor, and it has been done before. In fact, even the Abu Sayyaf, for example, we want them tried in Manila instead of being tried in these areas. And there have been other cases like the case of the Apatuans that have been transferred. And most of the time, Mr. President, those are cases that may involve either very, very powerful forces like the Abu Sayyaf or very, very powerful personalities in the Ampatuans. But in the case of policemen, Your Honor, I mean, these are policemen. These are supposed to be the guardians of the law. And I have a tendency to disagree that the policeman can influence the courts. Maybe he can intimidate the court up to a point.
Intimidate, that's influence by way of intimidation.
Intimidation, yes, Your Honor. But, you know, the politicians have more intimidation powers. You know, they can even promise, and I'm a victim of that, they can even promise promotions later on that they will work it out depending on the influence of that politician. But the policeman, I don't think he has that influence. And I think for purposes of geography, for example, when an offense occurs in Mindanao, it is kind of difficult and really very difficult for the common tao to have to go to Quezon City and Sandigan Bayan to pursue his case. I mean, even when I was pursuing my father's case, I was living in Olongapo and I would have to go to the Secretary of Justice from time to time, the NBI, and it was indeed very, very difficult. And eventually, the lower courts were able to pass on the cases, but up to a point. The masterminds obviously held sway in very powerful Imperial Manila at the time. And that is why it is important, Mr. President, that we give a chance to the lower areas of our country to make the system work. Otherwise, we will always doubt it, and it will never work. I mean, our doubts are traitors and make us, you know, fear and make us avoid the good we might do, as a Shakespeare say, by failing to attempt. And I think it's about time we try to attempt and make sure, after all, there are other avenues of appeal, like transfer of venue, or you can still appeal it to the higher court, the Supreme Court later on. And in return for that, the complainants would have their family together with them in their own homes, in their own areas, Your Honor.
Mr. President, this is not the first time that the issue of whether or not cases of public officials should be tried in the place where the public official holds office. Prior to Republic Act 10660, which redefined the jurisdiction of the Sandigan Bayan, there were attempts to, quote, regionalize, close quote, the Sandigan Bayan. In other words, to bring the Sandigan Bayan closer to the people and have the accused tried in the place where the crime was committed, which is basically the place where the office of the accused is located. However, these attempts did not see light insofar as the previous Congresses is concerned. There were two Senate bills, Senate Bill 3111 and Senate Bill 258, which during the 14th and 15th Congress proposed to regionalize the Sandigan Bayan and bring them to the regions in order to bring them theoretically closer to the people. But this Congress did not approve of that proposed regionalization. There was a testimony from the Justice of the Sandigan Bayan on that point when the congressional records will show that in a committee hearing on October 3, 2007 on Senate Bill number 258, Justice Peralta of the Sandigan Bayan said that the reason why the Sandigan Bayan has jurisdiction over, say, mayors committing minor offenses is the influence that the mayor may wield if the case is filed before the regular courts in the judicial region where the accused hold office. if this is a simple mayor, I can imagine that the reason applies with equal force. When you talk about a regional director of the Philippine National Police, who is certainly more powerful than the mayor, so that the reason why this jurisdiction over high-ranking public officials, including the police, was not placed in the regular courts in the regions is that this is to prevent the influence that may be wielded by the government official. This is the view of the Justice of the Sandigan Bayan during the hearing on Senate Bill 258 in October of 2007. That's on the record, Mr. President.
That is why, Your Honor, I, again, with respect, I take the opposite view on that matter. First of all, the Court of Appeals says regional courts already. In, again, the Oro and in Cebu. And second, it's about time that we accept the fact that people have to take responsibility if they want to seek justice. The law is not based on the power of men. The law is based on simple justice, that we must have reliable courts that will obviate the powerful, the wealthy, and the influential, and make sure that there is consistency. That is part of the pillars of the rule of law, that there is continuity of law, that there is consistency, and there is predictability, and that's why laws are made, Your Honor. We cannot make laws based on fear. We must make fear the future in this particular instance. And I think this debate, when the Supreme Court takes a look at it, it will enrich the firmament of decision-making, because the points of the gentleman from Iloilo are well taken. And I believe my point is also well taken, Your Honor, principally because we want to reverse the tide of fear in this country. That we can even put an amendment here that says any person found trying to intimidate a regional trial court involved with police, any policeman, can be immediately, summarily brought to administrative proceedings, Your Honor. Any hint of that, or, you know, you can even ask that for the moment, if there's a regional commander involved, that he be perhaps be transferred or suspended. I mean, there are many, many things that can be ramified, Your Honor. But I do want to feel that for the generation to come, I'd like to give them a sense of a justice system that is not intimidated by fear, that is based on the strength, on the inner strength of a people to overcome their fears and to make the law work. And that is why we are putting so much money in education. Free tuition fees are being given. We're trying to inculcate in this world of social media the idea that you can shame somebody. You can actually expose somebody on social media. I think the rules are changing. The experience of the times will prove that. And that's why, Your Honor, with all due respect, I'd like to stick to my argument that we can have this transferred and trust the appeal process later on, or trust the amendments that we can put in to strengthen the law, Your Honor.
Yeah, well, Mr. President, when these arguments were raised in these very halls of the Senate by the Senate President, by the Chairman of the Committee on Justice then, who was the sponsor of the measure, and in fact during the interpellation, again, that view was strengthened by the view that we should not let the jurisdiction be in the area where the official holds office, was because precisely of the influence that the official could possibly put on the court. And this is the view shared by Senator Angara, Senator Nene Pimentel, not when this was debated on, with Senator Angara saying, Ed Angara, saying that this provision is necessary, quote, to prevent the official from exerting influence or wield influence in the judicial region where he holds office, and that is the assumption of the amendment. The Senator Pimentel agreed with that statement. So this is borne out by the views of the Senate then when we passed the Republic Act 10660. This is not borne out of theoretical assumptions, but in fact was debated in this very hall itself, and that was the opinion rendered by our predecessors. But of course, it doesn't bind us if we believe that these statements are no longer valid. That's up to this Senate to so decide. I am just putting this on the record, that in fact, this was the policy adopted and found itself in the law, Republic Act 10660.
And, Your Honor, again, with all due respect, the system has failed us. I have high respects for Ed Angara and Senator Pimentel. I was a young pup in the Constitutional Convention when I look up to these gentlemen. I work with them here, and I've had the highest respect. We have clashed in terms of other things like the election law, or for that matter, in the erection of even special economic zones. But, Your Honor, we should not be victimized by a picture in time, a picture that denotes that we are weak, and forever will be weak. Otherwise, we would not have a result, Your Honor. Theoretically, at that time, the Spanish forces were very, very strong. The friars were very strong. And yet he dared write a book. And that book transformed a motley group of people, formerly Masons, and became the Katipuneros, and raised their hands. I mean, we have to train our people to fight for their rights. That is why the law is not in a vacuum. That's why the law allows us to transfer the venue. That's why the law allows us to question somebody when he is trying to intimidate us. That is why, Your Honor, when my father was assassinated, my mother ran. We were not afraid to be killed. That is why, Your Honor, we investigate 6.4 billion pesos smuggling of drugs. We could be intimidated by the volume, the amount of money, the amount of drugs coming out. And if we are going to say, theoretically, we will be intimidated, well, Your Honor, that is really the theory that is wrong as far as concerned, again, with all due respect. It's about time that we take risks, Your Honor, not to doubt ourselves, but to teach our people, like I say many times, to make fear their friend, to make the future their friend. And if we allow them that, and this discussion, I hope, will be flashed on television, I hope, I guess that's a futile hope, people understand that more, then it will be a decision by the people listening out there. It's right. It's time we stand up. It's time we stand up to these bullies. You know, what would happen if nobody stood up to the Ampatuans? What would happen, for example, if that killing in, even though they're drug pushers, they're the scum of the earth, and there's somebody there who saw, well, they did not follow the rules of engagement. They did not follow the rules of, handling, suspects. They just killed them all. They just eliminated them all. And therefore, we will all be afraid. And nobody will ever stand up anymore because we fear the system. We fear the powerful among the police. I think it's about time that we humanize the police. The police are human beings like us. They will also retire, Your Honor. These generals here around me, they will retire, and they will be subject also to the same threats. General Caringal, a police general, was killed in Quezon City. And remember, Your Honor, that many, many other policemen have been killed in the past. So if we live in a society of fear, there will be no change. I really think that when I was doing the work on extrajudicial killing, there are many people who will tell us, oh, you're tending to side with the administration. You're afraid. I am not afraid. And I'm sure just as I'm sure that Senator Dillon, and I saw him the other night, he backed me up when I said to the President, while we're talking here, you already have decided that he will stay. And I was so proud when I heard Senator Dillon say, we in the Senate do not agree with that decision. We will not support, putting this guy Faldon or the customs people to get away with this. And that is what this is all about, Your Honor. We have to stand up for change, transformational change, not transactional change that says that we have to kowtow. That is the law of the slave. We are not, and we refuse to be slaves. Sabi nga nila, no tyrant, sabi the Rizal, without slaves. I cannot allow myself to be a slave to fear, Your Honor. And I think we have known each other for a long time. The gentleman from Iloilo, we've been friends. Sometimes we've clashed. Sometimes we've disagreed. But what is the fate? The fate that we respect each other's minds. The fate that we respect each other's sense of justice. Sometimes we may disagree, but let this new Senate decide. If the past Senate did not want to make a decision on this because they fear, then let's roll the dice. Let the Senate now find out whether they have the gumption to say we can change this. Of course, we're not recklessly doing that, and that is why I really welcome this debate. I enjoy it. This is the way a Senate should be, and not just railroad a bill. And I thank the former Senate President for that. And I learned from these debates as well, Your Honor. And that's why I think, with all due respect to my good friend, I would have to take a position. And I even am, coming out and say, well, we can even have concurrent jurisdiction if that is the case, Your Honor. And with all due respect, that is my brief, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for those remarks, Mr. President. We're just debating here as to whether we will abandon that policy in the present law, Republic Act 10660, which has adopted as a policy that the members of the Philippine National Police who are alleged to have committed malfeasance should be tried in the region where their office is located. And the previous Congress took the view that we should not allow that kind of a situation for reasons that they have on record. And as we have stated from the very start earlier, that is a policy adopted by the previous Congress, and we are debating here in order to explain this to our colleagues, whether or not we should change that policy, we should depart from that policy, and at the end of the day, yes, this chamber will decide on that, and that's precisely the purpose of this debate, in order to we may have differing views with the sponsor, and which side our colleagues will finally cast their vote on is precisely the reason for the debate on this particular issue of jurisdiction. Mr. President, I have two other matters, two other issues on this bill. May I request that I be given some more time to review the same and resume my interpellation at some future date, with the permission of the gentleman.
Yes, Your Honor, willingly. I just pray that we can expeditiously handle this at the proper time, and I'm sure the gentleman is not known for taking his time on urgent matters, and therefore I hope that we can handle this at the next time we meet, either late this week or early next week, if that is possible. That is just a plea, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. President, we will support the sponsor on that. We will inform the interpellators, the minority leader, Senator Dillon, Senator Tiveros, and Senator Lacson that the sponsor is ready anytime, perhaps Wednesday or Monday. But they have given their consent to that, Mr. President. So with that, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1399 under Committee Report number 58.
Are there any objections? Hearing none, Committee Report number 58, the consideration is hereby suspended.
Thank you. Mr. President, in the agenda today, Next to be called is Senate Bill 1317, but Senator Joel Villanueva has agreed to the request of Senator Tiveros, and that is what I will do now. Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move to resume consideration of Senate Resolution number 454 under Committee Report 146.
Are there any objection? Consideration of Senate Resolution number 454 is now in order.
Mr. President, this is the resolution concurring in the ratification of the Convention concerning protection of the rights to organize and procedures for determining conditions of employment in the public service. The parliamentary status of the measure is that we're in the period of interpellations. And, during the last session that we took this up, we were about to close the period. No, in fact, we closed, I think, the period of interpellation. No, we did not. Anyway, it was, if we are in the period of interpellation, Mr. President, I move to close the period of interpellation.
Is there any objection? There being none, period of interpellation is hereby terminated.
Mr. President, this is a ratification of a convention, no? That it is one of the more important work of the Senate. But we have to pass it on second and third reading. On third reading, we will have a nominal voting. But today, we may agree to the passage on second reading. Yes, so I move that we pass, we approve on second reading Committee Report 146, PS Resolution 454, concurring in the ratification of the Convention concerning protection of rights, Mr. President.
Are there any objection? There being none, Senate Resolution number 454 under Committee Report number 146 is hereby approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move to suspend consideration of Committee Report 146 and PS Resolution 454 and take up third reading on Monday, Mr. President. Move to suspend consideration.
Are there any objection? Hearing none, the consideration is hereby suspended.
Okay. Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill 1317 under Committee Report 100. Yung si Os, ikaw, wag lang. Kunti lang. Kunti lang, dami pa eh, mga franchise saka ano eh. Thank you. This is the measure on the occupational safety and health standards. Parliamentary status of the measure. We are in the period of interpellation, Mr. President, so I move to recognize the sponsor, Chairman of the Committee on Labor, Senator Joel Villanueva, and to interpellate the Minority Leader, Senator Dillon, Mr. President.
Senator Villanueva is recognized. Likewise, to interpellate Senator Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. Majority Floor Leader, and thank you, Mr. Committee on Labor and Human Resource Development. Is now ready to answer any questions from our colleagues, Mr. President.
Mr. President, will the gentleman yield to a few questions on this matter?
Gladly, Mr. President, especially coming from the guru of gurus in the labor sector of this nation.
Okay.
Boundary na, sir.
I am about to waive my right to interpolate, but I am not swayed.
The labor sector on your right side, Mr. President,
I am not swayed.
nodding
So
and
there,
clapping their hands.
Mr. President, just a few questions to establish certain policy considerations that this measure proposes. First, for the record, can we spread into the record what the purpose of this bill is? If enacted into law, what does it seek to achieve?
Thank you, Mr. President. This particular measure seek to strengthen our current regulations on occupational health and safety by, number one, clarifying the responsibilities of the employers and workers, requiring all establishments, project sites, and all other places where work is being undertaken to have safety and health program containing, among others, safety and health promotion, training and education, policies of a drug-free workplace, HIV, AIDS, tuberculosis, hepatitis prevention and control, explicitly providing, Mr. President, that the Department of Labor and Employment shall conduct an annual assessment of the safety and health condition of all workplaces in the Philippines. Another salient feature, Mr. President, is to provide an employment insurance to be given to workers who are involuntarily separated from service or employment due to violation of this proposed measure. These employees, Mr. President, shall be entitled to a monthly cash support equivalent to the existing monthly minimum wage or a minimum or a maximum of 6 months, provided, of course, Mr. President, that the workers have at least 6 months of contribution prior to the involuntary separation. Another issue, Mr. President, is that we can, through this measure, will be able to enumerate unlawful OSH or Occupational Safety and Health Standards related acts and providing for a stiffer penalty for these violations. It also aims to make the employer and contractors, subcontractors, solidarily responsible for complying with occupational safety and health standards. And last but not the least, Mr. President, it includes a coordinative mechanism where it would create an inter-agency harmonization of functions and mandates government agencies, for example, DENR, DOE, DOTR, DA, DPWH, DTI, DOH, DILG, and that's it, and DILG, Mr. President.
That's a mouthful, Mr. President. I lost track of the purpose of the bill with that long enumeration of the purposes for this bill. But let me go to some specifics. Section 2, let me read it. This act shall apply to all establishments, projects, sites, and all other places in all industries where work is being undertaken in all branches of economic activity, regardless of the number of employees, nature of operations, and the risk of hazard involved. Mr. President, how many establishments are covered by this act?
According to the Department of Labor and Employment, it's 937,554 establishments, Mr. President.
900, again?
937,
937,
554 establishments.
554 establishments. Nearly a million establishments.
Yes,
Just
Mr.
about,
President.
60,000 short. And this law will be enforced through the inspectorate machinery of the Department of Labor. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. President.
Now, you are talking about 937,554 establishments. How many inspectors would you have to hire in order to monitor compliance with this law?
Well, currently, Mr. President, there are about 574 labor law compliance officers. And,
574 labor law compliance officers
Yes,
who would
and-
inspect compliance with the minimum wage, with the labor standards, with all others other than occupational safety and health standards. Is that correct?
on top, it's the same figures, but it's a minimum wage. Yes, Mr. President,
No.
it's the same number, and the Department of Labor is asking for additional 200 labor law compliance officers this year, Mr. President, and it's already part of their annual budget for this year.
All right. We are going to hire 200 more workers just to enforce this law. How much will that cost the Filipino people?
For additional. Yung additional. You're asking about additional.
Or you want to compute it later and...
Yes, Mr. President, we'll give the gentleman from Iloilo the complete list. Mr. President, if I may, if the distinguished gentleman would also like to ask about establishments, the
No, I'm the
the
one
composition of the 937,000.
I don't want to ask that, Mr. President.
Just to give an idea,
No,
Mr.
I
President.
don't want to ask, I have...
I will not volunteer this information, Mr. President.
No. Mr. President, you know, okay, here we are trying to pass a law which will require additional bureaucracy of 200 inspectors in addition to the 574 we have now. And we have Senator Ligarda working hard on a retrenchment program
Right sizing.
of the national government called right sizing. But this is actually a retrenchment. So on the one hand, Senator Legarda is saying, let us retrench, and Senator Villanueva says, let us add 200. Can we just have one standard, Mr. President?
Mr. President,
Ano ba ito?
if I may, Mr. President, I just got the information from the Department of Labor and Employment that we need additional 350 million pesos, Mr. President, for the additional compliance officers. But I agree, Mr. President, with the minority leader's statement, and that's why, if you would recall, Mr. President, this representation also enlisted his name as one of the interpellators in the right-sizing bill.
So that, so how do we reconcile this? We are here saying, one hand saying we should right size or retrench. On the other hand, we also say, let us add to the bureaucracy because we have a new law that will require 200 new employees and will spend 50 million in salaries and benefits.
Yes, Mr. President. This representation, your committee believes that it is important that we do this. This is a social contract that we're talking about in order to take care of our workers. We talk about the value of our workers' lives, which is at stake for so many years, Mr. President, and that's why we believe that this is in order and that we can be able to help ensure the safety of our workers, Mr. President.
I'm sorry, but those are all theoretical premises. In point of fact, our system is not effective, if I may say, is flawed. No, notwithstanding 574 members of the inspectorate force, we know that violations of minimum wages, of labor standards, continue to be a reality that we meet in our workplaces. Now, so I regret that I cannot subscribe to the view that adding 300 or 200 more inspectors will suddenly make the life of the workers safer. I don't believe that this kind of a system has not worked, has failed us for the last 40 years that it has been in our statute books. Because if I may ask, presently violations of minimum wage and labor standards is penalized under the labor code. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. President.
It is penalized with, it's a criminal offense.
Yes.
Is that correct? Yes.
Yes, Mr. President.
Now, notwithstanding the fact that it is a criminal offense, violations are rampant. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
So how do we propose to solve this continuous violation by again making this an unlawful and a criminal offense, we must rethink this approach. As I have discussed with the gentleman
Yes.
in our various conversation, maybe the more effective way is to incentivize compliance. In other words, for example, under the labor code, an employer who undertakes training of employees are allowed an additional deduction other than the standard deduction from his income as an incentive for him to train his workers. Maybe instead of this system of penalizing the employers, and I will show penalizing the employers, maybe the better tack is to think of how to reward those who are complying through incentives, and maybe we can have a better compliance because it has not worked, Mr. President. We have had a system, may mga inspektor na wala nang ginawa kung hindi pumasok sa establishmento. Sigurado ako sa San Juan, maraming mga pasok doon na inspektor. And when you grant discretion, that is an opportunity for some shenanigans. Regulation creates an opportunity for corruption, Mr. President. We all know that. So that Section 4, for example, is so broad, Section 4 of this proposed measure is so broad that it is a rich source of discretion on the part of the labor inspectors to find violations and therefore pagkikitaan. That is my basic objection to this bill. I have no problem about coming up with a system which will protect our workers, but I raise the basic issue. Is imposing penalties, creating 200 positions, paying 350 million pesos annually the way of helping our workers? Or should we look at a system of an incentive and encourage the employers to comply with our labor standards, our occupational safety and health standards that can provide better protection to our workers? It's a philosophical approach to this system which has failed us anyway.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I cannot agree more with the sentiments of the minority leader, and as the distinguished gentleman from Iloilo mentioned a while ago that we talk about this, and I agree that we need to somehow do, we become more creative about this and give incentives to employers and industry players. But let me point out also, Mr. President, that for quite some time we have not yet tried this kind of strategy in order to penalize employers violating OSH standards. But I agree, Mr. President, again, for the record, and will be happy to listen to the wisdom of the distinguished gentleman from Iloilo insofar as giving incentives is concerned.
Yes, because the way, if you read the bill in its entirety, you are imposing so many obligations and burden the employer with so many reports that I do not know how the Department of Labor anyway will handle these reports. Just to give a specific example. All right. Under saan ba yung mga reports? 1 minute suspension, Mr. President.
Session suspended.
He requires reporting. Page 7. Ito.
Yung hinihingi natin, pinapahirapan natin.
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, under Section 17 of the proposed measure, all employers shall be required to submit all reports and notifications prescribed by the DOLE. Second, all hospitals and clinics shall submit all reports related to work injuries and illnesses to the DOLE. There are nearly 1 million establishments covered. What will the Department of Labor do with over nearly 1 million of these reports? Will we hire again personnel in order to examine these reports?
Mr. President, the Department of Labor and Employment confessed to this representation that, in fact, these reports are not being complied with the establishments that the distinguished gentleman was talking about, Mr. President.
I'm sorry?
They are not complying.
They are not complying. And we intend to punish them for not complying. That's the bit of this bill.
That's one of the major goals of this bill, Mr. President.
So may I ask
to
again,
compel-
there are 937,000 establishments covered. Is it 937? Yeah. 937,000. There are theoretically 900,000 reports every year. Baka po yung buong kagawaran ng paggawa, ala nang gagawin kung hindi titingnan itong mga report na ito. 937,000 reports.
Mr. President, we were told that at least 90% of these total establishments would fall under MSMEs. And with regard to OSH standards for MSMEs, the department has not been developed. But OSH is being implemented in MSMEs through programs on productivity such as 5S and developmental approaches to address labor laws violation caused by lack of information on labor laws, rules and regulations, standards and issuances.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am just reading the proposed bill, the proposed law. And if you read the proposed law, that is what is required of the employer. Submit 937,000 reports on an annual basis. Ano po ang gagawin dito sa report na ito? At sino po ang magbabasa nito?
We were told, Mr. President, that the department would analyze all the reports for policy formulation, Mr. President.
Does the gentleman from Bulacan believe in what his resource persons are telling him, or is just...
I wanted to believe, Mr. President, but the distinguished minority leader have convinced this representation that we should amend this portion and do something about it.
Yes. Okay. I noticed that you have excluded the public sector from occupational safety and health policies. Why? Are public employees not entitled to safety?
It is the Civil Service Commission, Mr. President, that is in charge of the public sector, according to the Department of Labor and Employment.
No, but is safety not a common concern of both the public and the private sector?
I agree, Mr. President, that we are also entitled to
Yes, oh.
to safety and health. But according to the department, it is the civil service who is on top of the helm, Mr. President.
Now, do you realize that under this bill, Mr. President, the employer is required to hire full-time security officers?
Safety officers, Mr.
Yes,
President.
all establishments.
Yes, Mr. President.
937,000 safety officers.
Not the MSMEs, Mr. President. The 90% of the total establishment that we mentioned are not required.
are what?
Are not required, the
Where
MSMEs.
where does it say? It says, to ensure that the safety and health program is duly followed and enforced, all establishments, projects, sites, and all other places where work is being undertaken shall have a full-time safety officer.
Yes,
937 full-time safety officer? Where does it say that the SMSE are exempted?
Yes. Mr. President, in Section 30 of the particularly proposed measure, applicability to micro and small enterprises specific to MSEs, the department shall develop OSHCOR compliance standards to ensure safe and healthy workplaces. So, Mr. President, all MSEs shall be required to implement the prescribed standards for housekeeping, materials handling and storage, electrical and mechanical safety, chemical safety, emergency preparedness, fire safety, PPE, and monitor hazards regularly.
My reading of this section does not exempt the MSEs from hiring, from being required to hire full-time safety officers.
Mr. President, we see the point of the distinguished minority leader, but the Section 11, we encourage that Section 11 be looked upon as in conjunction with Section 30, Mr. President.
You know, this
Safety
is a
officer.
social
It's a safety
legislation, and all of these are construed
Yes.
in favor of the better conditions of our working class, and I'm afraid that that correlation will not effectively prevent anyone from demanding that all establishments should hire a full-time safety officer.
Yes,
But
Mr. President,
assuming that you exclude small and medium enterprises, how many
establishment.
do you hire? What's the total of the establishments that would be required to hire full-time safety officers?
So 80 to 90,000 establishments. But how many need to hire? Kung sila lang? The 80 to 90. May I ask for a 1-minute suspension, Mr. President?
Session is suspended.
No. Yeah.
Safety officer, yes. Oh, okay. Pero ang sinasabi ko is, it will become full-time. Hindi. Not necessarily full-time. Okay. We're ready, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Thank you, Mr. President. And to answer the question of the distinguished gentleman from Iloilo, without the MSMEs, we have about 80 to 90,000 establishments. And if we're looking or talking about the safety officers, they are not supposed to hire new safety officers. In fact, they will be trained and somehow be converted to become safety officers of the particular establishment, Mr. President.
But when you remove a particular worker from his usual work to convert him into a full-time safety officer, you need a substitute for that particular worker. So, in effect, you will hire 80,000 to 90,000 full-time safety officers.
Perhaps that should be the concern of this committee, and we will adjust and make some amendments and make sure that it is clear that we are not hiring additional worker in order to train and convert these workers to become safety officers, Mr. President.
No, but, so are we, okay, the other thing, it is not only 80 to 90,000 establishment, because construction sites would also require safety officers,
Definitely. Yes, Mr. President.
hindi ba?
I'm sorry, I lost the question, Mr. President.
The requirement for safety officer is not only for establishments and established companies. It also includes
Construction.
projects,
Construction sites.
sites, and all other places where work is being undertaken. Such a broad net to include everybody would be now required to have a full-time safety officer. Not only 80 to 90,000 employers, but also you have to
So more than?
look at construction sites
More
and other work sites, which would now have to hire full-time safety officers. Is that correct?
Well, Mr. President, as a practice, they already have safety officers in these project sites, and we just wanted to make sure that the safety officers will be able to do its job in ensuring that OSH is being implemented.
And if the inspector is not satisfied that Juan de la Cruz is a full-time safety officer, that is a violation which can subject the employer to criminal prosecution.
It is a deficiency, Mr. President, according to the Department of Labor and Employment, but it can be corrected, Mr. President.
But since we are saying enforcement through declaring them certain acts as unlawful, would be this fall part of that?
The idea, Mr. President, is to compel these establishments to submit and implement OSH standards.
Now, these safety officers must be accredited by the DOLE. Ano bang ibig sabihin ng accredited by the DOLE? Yung 80,000 safety officers must have an ID na in-issue ng Department of Labor that they are accredited by the
Solely
Department of Labor.
solely accredited.
The next thing that we know, Mr. President, is that there is an association of safety officers. And all the corresponding conventions that would have to be undertaken, alam na po natin ang bureaucracia So mayroon diyang Association of Safety Officers. Magko-convention sa Boracay. Ganun po yun eh. Hindi po ba?
I agree, Mr. President. In
agree.
fact, it's existing, and the gentleman is correct in saying that there's an existing association of safety officers. And while it is true that the Department of Labor and Employment would have the sole accrediting authority, there is a requirement for these safety officers to undergo at least 40 hours of mandatory training for both construction and non-construction workers, Mr. President.
Who will supervise and who will do the accreditation? The Department of Labor.
Yes, Mr. President.
How many employees do we have to hire in order to accredit 80,000 to 90,000 safety officers?
Mr. President, right now it's existing, and there's no need to hire for
Mamaya yan, magreklamo dahil matagal ang accreditation.
There's also-
At matagal ang accreditation, dahil kulang ang tao.
Perhaps it's also important, Mr. President, to point out that the UP College of Public Health and accredited private training organizations are part of accrediting committee, Mr. Chair.
You know, Mr. President, I am not against occupational health and safety. In fact, for the record, this representation as Secretary of Labor was the one who put up that Occupational Health and Safety Center. So this is something that I support. But the way this bill is crafted, it will provide a rich opportunity for discretion, and the exercise of discretion equals an opportunity for something undesirable. It creates a bureaucracy of another 200 bureaucrats at a cost of 350 million. It makes life more difficult for the companies by requiring 937 or so companies to submit annual reports on occupational safety and health. There are other things here which I have not even touched yet, but this is just, these are some of the observations that we had. So may we at this stage suspend our interpellation and come back after when this is again placed on the table, so that we can point out to the good sponsor why we should not have this kind of a system of not only punishing or creating unlawful or considering certain activities or failure to comply with certain standards as unlawful, punishing the employer, adding bureaucracy, and all the other things which we can dispense with, and probably examine the whole concept of an inspectorate and system which will just keep on bloating our bureaucracy when Senator Legarda is so concerned, and maybe provide an incentive for compliance rather than continue with the system of punishment. So we suspend our interpellation.
Thank you, Mr. President. But before we suspend, we'd just like to put on record, that's why we really need the wisdom and inputs of our former Labor Secretary, our distinguished Minority Floor Leader, and again put also on record that this particular measure is not really more of a penalizing, but more of compelling our establishments, industries, for them to immediately correct the standards, because our main concern is not really, Mr. President, to penalize, but to ensure that our workers are protected through this occupational health and safety standards. Thank you, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1317 under Committee Report 100.
Is there any objection? There being none, the bill under consideration is suspended.
Mr. President, I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill 1466 under Committee Report 104.
Is there any objection? There being none, the bill is now under consideration.
Mr. President, this is the measure prohibiting the imposition of expiry dates on gift checks. The parliamentary status of the measure is that we have already closed the period of amendments and requested that clean copies be distributed to the senators. So unless our colleagues have any comments on the distributed clean copies of the measure, I move that we approve on second reading Senate Bill 1466 under Committee Report 104.
Is there any objection? There being none, Senate Bill number 1466 is approved on second reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1466 under Committee Report 104.
Is there any objection? There being none, Senate Bill 1466 is suspended.
Mr. President, I move to resume consideration of the following House bills, particularly on the congressional franchise on various broadcasting stations in some parts of the country. House Bill 5063 under Committee Report 89, House Bill 5212 under Committee Report 90, House Bill 5064 under Committee Report 91, House Bill 5177 under Committee Report 92, House Bill 5175 under Committee Report 93, House Bill 5211 under Committee Report 94, and House Bill 4636 under Committee Report 95, House Bill 5176 under Committee Report 96.
Is there any objection? There being none, all those House bills enumerated by the Majority Leader is in order.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the measure is that we were in the period of interpellation, but then I understand that the President Pro Temp has already informed the sponsor that he will no longer interpellate and has been informed of the contents of the House bill. So, at this point, Mr. President, I move to close the period of interpellation on the House bills that I have mentioned.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move to suspend consideration of House Bills 5063, 5212, 5064, 5177, 5175, 5211, 4636, and 5176.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Risa, ready ka? Fiscal Monetary Report. Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill 1483 under Committee Report 117.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, this is the Fiscal and Monetary Report Act of 2017. Parliamentary status of the measure is that we are in the period of interpellation. So may we recognize the sponsor, Chairman of the Committee on Economic Affairs, Senator Win Gatchalian, and to interpellate Senator Hontiveros, and then thereafter the Minority Leader, Mr. President. Scheduled.
Senator Antiveros is recognized to interpellate the Chairman of the Economic Affairs Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, good sponsor, allow me first to state that I support this initiative by Congress to compel our economic managers to report biannually. I believe that through this mechanism, we will have a better appreciation of the plans and directions that our country will be taking. So, Mr. President, would the good sponsor allow me just a couple of questions?
I'm more than happy to receive some questions, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Under the current setup, good sponsor, what mechanisms are in place to exact accountability against any of our economic managers should there be, say, abuses in how we handle foreign loans? Let's say, for example, or for instance, a contracted loan was found to be illegitimate after a thorough evaluation has been made. And I know, Mr. President, that the good sponsor is, that this question is not alien to him since he chaired a, I believe, very good hearing on one of our Senate resolutions regarding a debt audit of the first 20 identified questionable loans by the Freedom from Debt Coalitions. So just back to my question, Mr. President, good sponsors, what mechanisms are in place to exact accountability should there be abuses in how we handle foreign loans?
Thank you, Mr. President. There are two mechanisms that can basically check the loans being engaged by our own government. Number one is under the Constitution, which is Article number 7, Section 20 of the Constitution, in which BSP will have to submit to Congress any foreign loans that are undertaken by our government. And the other one is under Republic Act number 6724, an act organizing a joint legislative executive foreign debt council, defining its objective, powers, and functions. And this is actually another mechanism wherein both the executive and the legislative branch of government will tackle loans being entered by our government.
Thank you, Mr. President, good sponsor. Of course, there's no need for me to ask a follow-up question about the Constitution since that is the fundamental law, and I believe that this resolution is in the spirit of seeking a fuller obedience to the constitutional mandate. But just a quick follow-up question on the Joint Executive Legislative Foreign Debt Council. Is it actually constantly and fully operational and working on the important issues that this resolution is bringing the Senate's attention to, Mr. President?
As far as we're concerned, this council is in full force because it's a law already. However, we have not received any report as to what is the output of this council. I think from the time this Congress convened, it only met once. However, the council is required to submit quarterly reports and generate quarterly outputs. Let me just point out very clearly that even under the Constitution and in this Republic Act, reports are mandated to be submitted by the different different departments of the economic cluster. However, none of these two mechanisms require physical presence, and this is what the bill calls for: the physical presence of the 4 different branches of the economic cluster, which is DOF, DBM, NEDA, and BSP.
In which case, Mr. President, all the more I fully support this initiative to compel that physical presence of the 4 identified departments or institutions before Congress.
Definitely.
And yes, Mr. President, and which physical presence will facilitate also the public through Congress hearing the reports, including from this joint Executive Legislative Foreign Debt Council. Thank you, Mr. President. So to my last question, I understand that part of what the DBM is supposed to present, among others, will be the expenditure program as well as the status of disbursement. These 2 items are clearly linked to the performance of national government agencies. May I know, Mr. President, good sponsor, the status of the National Evaluation Policy Framework jointly developed by NEDA and DBM and covered by a joint memorandum circular issued in July 2015. This tool was supposed to be used for the purposive conduct of evaluations in the public sector in support of good governance, transparency, accountability, and evidence-based decision-making. So, is this something that the administration is pursuing or abandoning? And if it is pursuing such, may we get an update on this National Evaluation Policy Framework, Mr. President, good sponsor?
In our 2 hearings and technical working group, ironing out the details of this bill, I never came across of this department circular that will enlighten Congress to the expenditures and accounts of the government. I understand that all of these questions are only answered on a ad hoc basis, so meaning if Congress requires the DBM to give us a briefing, they will come here and give us a briefing. However, in the name of transparency, in the spirit of transparency, I know for a fact that DBM regularly posts their expenditure balance and expenditures in their website. In fact, I went through their website last week just to look at the balances. However, the posting is also quite a challenge because it's not updated as regularly as what we want it to be. No? And this is where this bill will come into play, because this bill requires the DBM to come here twice a year to physically report to Congress the balances of government, the expenditures of government, and also the challenges in the budgeting process.
In which case, Mr. President, good sponsor, I guess it would be premature for me to follow up on that question, whether the administration is pursuing or abandoning this framework. But I hope it's also an interesting question for the good sponsor that we find out the answer to that. And so in that way, perhaps profit even more by DBM's already regular posts on the website. And through this resolution, to possibly get the department with NEDA to fully also report on the framework, which was the subject of their joint memorandum circular, to report to Congress and then through us to the public.
Definitely, Mr. President. we will follow up on this department order and also on this framework. It's really quite surprising for us that this is the first time I've heard of that framework, but definitely we'll follow up on that and get some details regarding that framework.
Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr.
President and good sponsor.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. President, may we recognize the Minority Leader for the continuing interpellations?
Minority Leader is recognized.
I'm overworked, Mr. President.
Overwork.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the gentleman yield?
Don't worry, Minority Leader. I anticipate the announcement of the Majority Leader this later on with regard to work tomorrow.
Mr. President, will the gentleman yield to some basic questions on this proposed measure?
I'll gladly answer some basic questions from the esteemed Minority Leader.
Mr. President, the way I would read this law, it is basically requiring the Secretary of Finance, the Secretary of the National Economic and Development Authority, or the Director General of the NEDA, the DBM Secretary, and the Governor of the Central Bank to appear biannually before a joint session of Congress. Why a joint session?
Mr. President, I'm actually expecting that question from the esteemed Minority Floor Leader. This is actually a suggestion by the representative from the Bangko Sentral of ng Pilipinas, which we found that it's definitely not the proper terminology. So we are actually proposing an amendment later on. Instead of a joint session, we will be proposing a joint hearing. This is actually from both the congressional body and also the Senate body. So it's
A joint hearing of the committees of both houses?
yes, of the various committees of both houses. We identified 4 committees related to the economic cluster in both the Senate and the House, and these committees will now convene jointly in a hearing. And what we are proposing in this bill is actually inviting the 4 economic clusters also of the executive to physically appear and brief the members of the House and the members of the Senate.
All right. Well, that's a good clarification because the Senate President pro tempore in his co-sponsorship speech, as reflected in our journal, that is says, quote, "The bill I have filed calls for their mandatory twice-a-year appearance before each House of Congress." Certainly, each House of Congress is an ocean, there's a difference, an ocean of a difference between each House of Congress and joint session of Congress. So now we are clear that the bill does not call for a joint session of Congress, but a joint session of the committees of both Congress.
Just to explain, Mr. President, the original proponent of this bill is our Senate pro tempore, Senator Ralph Recto, and the original proposal was a separate hearing in the House and in the Senate. So twice a year in the House and twice a year in the Senate. A lot of the actually majority.
Similar to what they do in the United
United
States.
States.
Yes.
So it is appearance before each House of Congress. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, Mr. President.
all right.
However, in our hearings, in the 2 hearings, the economic team suggested that if we can just do a joint hearing twice a year, so it will save them 2 trips, you know, to the House of Representatives. And this is actually a proposal that I will be actually discussing with the original proponent of this bill. This is actually, again, to save time and the trips, considering that traffic in this metropolitan area is not as convenient. So the economic cluster suggested that if we can just combine, because eventually they'll be reporting the same thing to Congress and the same thing to the Senate. So they pleaded that we should just come out with a joint hearing for the economic managers twice a year.
You know, given, okay, there are, I don't know how many committees in the Senate would be involved here, but I assume, given the number of membership in each committee, this practically would be the entire Senate when you call the 4 committees or so to a hearing.
We identified 4 committees that are related to economics or the economy. In the House, it's the Committee on Appropriations, Committee on Ways and Means, Committee on Economic Affairs, Committee on Banks and Financial Intermediaries. In the Senate, it's Committee on Finance, Committee on Ways and Means, Committee on Economic Affairs, Committee on Banks, Financial Institutions, and Currencies.
So that's practically the whole Senate membership.
Basically, yes,
Now,
Mr. President.
Mr. President, you are aware that we have a question hour found in Article 6, Section 22 of our Constitution, which I would want to put on the record. And it says, the heads of the departments may, upon the initiative with the consent of the President, or upon the request of either House, as the rules of each House shall provide, appear and be heard by such House on any matter pertaining to their departments. This is a constitutional provision which authorizes this chamber to call on on the 4 cabinet secretaries, members of the economic team of the executive branch, to answer questions before the whole Senate. This is implemented by Section 125 of our rules, which basically governs the appearance of cabinet members in implementation of this constitutional provision. Given this, would there still be a need of a law to require, to achieve the purpose for which the bill is being presented, Mr. President?
Yep. Mr. President, this bill aims to put a system in the reporting of fiscal and monetary policies, and also as well as the economic policies of the government. There's a reason why it's pegged in the month of March and September. The month of March is actually prior to the crafting of the budget, and the month of September is prior to the deliberation of the budget.
Can we not pass a resolution saying that henceforth the question hour will be in March and in September?
I think what we intend to do is to institutionalize this, Mr. President. When we have a bill and the dates are identified in that bill, the tendency of the economic managers is to prepare relevant information before they appear on those dates. And in the bill, we also identified specifically what are the reports needed during those personal appearances here in the Senate and Congress. So the aim really here is to put a system in place in terms of educating the legislative branch regarding the fiscal and monetary as well as the economic policies of the government. And this will actually aid us also in crafting the budget as well as moving forward with our economic policies.
In substance, Mr. President, I have no objections to this bill because it's really, the system is found in the Constitution, in our rules, but you would want to pass a bill on this. As I said, we have no objection. We just have reservations about the form in which this is being done, a law. It could be done, it is already provided in the Constitution, and it can be simpler. It need not be a law, but the substance of the rule and the proposed, the purpose, we have no objection. So with the statement of the gentleman that a joint session is not really what is intended, but just a joint session of the committees.
Yes, yes.
I have no objections to this bill, but maybe we can consider, and we would request a good sponsor to figure out whether a resolution would suffice, or resolution of both houses, or really a law that is being proposed. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President, and definitely I will, this committee will look into the proposals of the good minority leader as to whether we can issue a resolution instead of a bill, but also we will take into account also the suggestions, the other suggestions of the minority floor leader. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Majority Leader.
Mr. President, there are still members who have signified their intention to interpolate for one, that is the Senator Manny Pacquiao. So I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1483 under Committee Report 117.
Is there any objection? There being none, the Senate bill under consideration is suspended for the meantime.
We have a 1 minute suspension, Mr. President.
Session is suspended for a minute.
Wala na yung mga interpellators dyan. Wala na eh. Oo. Wala na rito eh. Eh si Pa, pagod na eh. Siya lahat eh, overwork na eh.
Take note ko na, send sa akin.
Wednesday na.
Sige. Una ako
Oh, sige.
Session is resumed. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, earlier we were informed by the Sergeant at Arms that there will be difficulty to reach the Senate tomorrow, not only members of the Senate, but also the employees, because of the ASEAN, which is being held in our area. And Ross Boulevard will be closed, I think, for 9 hours. And therefore, with that in mind, with the concurrence of the Senate President and the Minority Leader, I move that we adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Wednesday, August 9, 2017.
Session is adjourned until 3 p.m. Wednesday, August 9. But before that, may we recognize the Minority Leader.
Mr. President, as the Majority Leader may be aware, there are committee hearings scheduled tomorrow. In fact, tomorrow at 9 a.m., there is a DBCC hearing scheduled by the Committee on Finance. And I think there are 1 or 2 other committee hearings. May we know if these committee hearings will proceed, given the fact that the Majority Leader just moved that we will not have a session of the Senate tomorrow, but these are committees.
The presiding officer is informed that the scheduled DBCC hearing tomorrow is rescheduled for Wednesday.
It has already been originally scheduled for Wednesday, so tomorrow is canceled.
It's canceled.
It's tomorrow and Wednesday, August 8 and 9. Okay, and the other, if there are other committee hearings, they're likewise canceled.
Yes, Mr. President, we have been informed just a few moments ago that they have been moved for Wednesday already, because it'll be difficult to come to the Senate tomorrow.
In short, there will be no committee hearings tomorrow.
No committee hearings tomorrow.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you very much, Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
I call for the previous question.
Yes, there was a motion earlier, and there have been no objections. We are adjourning session until 3 p.m. on Wednesday.